Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's tutorial. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going into a different method of selecting using the pen tool. A couple things that I just wanted to show with that very quickly. I also wanted to show how to work with masks, a couple ways to approach that. Talk about what masks are, of course, and that is going to lead into something called adjustment layers, which hopefully everyone will find quite useful for yourselves. So let's get right to it, and we're going to get right into working with masks. Now, to get started with this, I'm going to go to my place embedded, and I'm going to bring in my pizza. All right, looks awesome. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to basically select the area that I want to select for this. Now, the simplest way to approach this, of course, would be using one of the selections. But let's just say for whatever reason, we need something a little bit more precise than the quick selection. Or we basically just want to select a very specific part. Now, the way we could do this in another way than we've talked before is using the pen tool for that. That can be found right over here. Now, you could either start this off with its default settings, or alternatively, you could try to use one of the other options over here. I wouldn't go with shape because it really wouldn't work too well for us. I'm just going to stay with path. And basically what this will do is it will allow you to make a selection based on, well, where you are right now. So I'm going to get started as usual. Find an area where there's a corner, because that usually tends to make things easier. But I'm just going to give this area a quick little tap. Then I'm going to click and drag over here. Give that a click and drag. Quick little tap. And basically just select around here. So again, if you click and drag, that basically makes yourself curves like we learned in a previous lecture. Now usually I try and actually select as much as possible, like what you're seeing over here. And just for the sake of argument, I'm just going to give these areas a quick little tap when I get into the crevices. And ideally, you want to make sure that you use as much of the curves more than just putting in a bunch of points. It basically is a far more efficient way to work. And just because of the time, I'm just going to go a little bit on the quick side. Now, one thing that's kind of neat about this is this does have a pen option and a couple other options that are similar to Illustrator. But again, if you're going to be making vectors and stuff like that, you're probably better off just sticking with Illustrator at that time. But at the very least, when trying to make a selection, this does actually work pretty nicely. So if there's any last changes I need to make, I still can make them. Just going to use the Z tool, kind of zoom in, and I could definitely see that there's a couple areas that could be improved. So I'm going to go over here. There's my direct selection, and I still can make adjustments on the fly. So that is pretty awesome. So again, I'm just being a little overly cautious here. Usually I probably wouldn't be going quite so deep into detail, but in this case, it's coming out pretty nice. So, yeah, there we are. Like any other time with the pen tool, most likely you're going to have to make some adjustments, and that's okay. So again, I'm just trying to make this selection extra precise. Perfect. And if a little of it goes through, that's not going to be the end of the world for this particular project. Okay, I think I got most of it. Oop, just a little corner over here. But again, I'm just being a little extra cautious with this. But I think we could actually move on very shortly. Yep, there we are. And, ooh, this definitely needs to be fixed. This is why it's always a good idea when you're using the pen tool to just double check yourself just in case something went wrong. And boy howdy, did something go wrong here. But that's okay, because I could still fix it. And I think this is... Oop, just going to check this. Yep, no shenanigans going on over here. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And as stated, using this pen tool, similar to, again, what we used for Illustrator, if the pen tool is still selected, I can always go back, by the way. Cool. And you could make this into the mask directly, or you can make this into a shape. I'm going to just choose selection for now, just because I want to stay on task and such. And it's going to ask if you want a feather. Basically, that means adding a little bit of anti-alias or a little bit of fall off in these areas. But for now, I'm just going to hit OK. And there's my selection, coming in quite nicely. So again, if you're finding that the other selection, like the marquee tool, the lasso tool, or the quick selection tool is not really suiting your needs, the pen tool is always a viable option. Just make sure it's on path and that you make sure you add the selection after you're done. And it's relatively easy peasy. Okay, so selection's done. Let's get into masks. Now, again, the main reason why I didn't go into the masks right away is I wanted to take a moment to kind of explain how they work. Okay, now what a mask is, it's an area of your layer, in this case what my pizza is, that potentially could be used to make adjustments or changes in that particular section by itself. Now what's cool about this that you're going to see is if we used one of the quick selection elements, which is basically right here, it says add layer mask. It basically makes it, as you see here, a selection, but the cool part about this is it's a selection here that stays pretty much forever until you decide to get rid of it. So if I go to my channels over here, you'll see that we have the red, green, and blue areas for your color and a new section called mask. So I'm going to go in here just to show how this works. And basically the way that the mask is working is anything that's in the white area is seen, anything that's in the black area is basically gone. And the red, green, and blue, the fact that this is turned on, basically shows the mask in kind of a preview-like state. So if I was to turn off said mask, or sorry, the RGB, you'd be able to see the mask in its purest form. Once again, the way that the mask works, anything that's white will be seen, anything that's black will be unseen. And neat thing about this as well, this can be still adjusted after the fact. So again, I have my pizza mask turned on. If I was to go to the brush tool, it's basically this one over here. Definitely going to want to make this bigger just for this demonstration. I could use the white to bring back elements like so, or I could use, undo's your friend by the way, or I could use the black to get rid of more. As you can see, I'm kind of doing that right here. And of course, if I bring in the white, I can bring it all back. Relatively easy peasy. Then once you're done, you turn off the mask, select your RGB, and then you can go back into your layers and so on. Now, a nice thing about using the mask is it lets you work in a method called non-destructively, which basically means you make your selection, you can get rid of what you don't need, but if you find out later on you need that stuff back, all you would need to do is just go into your channels yet again, like I just did, and turn off all this other stuff. And again, if I need to get rid of it, I could just paint that black. But again, if you keep the RGB turned on, it makes that step a heck of a lot easier. And again, if I want to bring something back, I just go to the white area and paint that white. It's relatively simple to do when you understand it. But I would like to go a little bit more into detail of talking about masks. So let's do that. So I'm going to turn this off for now. And I'm going to, again, place in other picture. Again, place embedded. I'm going to go to my spatula. And I am going to basically do my, just going to make that a little bit bigger. That'll do. And hit return. And again, it's still a smart object. So again, if I wanted to adjust this, I would have to either rasterize said layer or alternatively use that masking I just showed everybody. So once again, I'm going to use the selection. This time I'm going to use a quick selection and just select the spatula the best I can. Good news, it actually selects pretty quickly, so that is awesome. All right, just double checking, no major problems. So again, what I want to just show real quick before we actually do the actual mask, because again, we could always use the quick mask over here. The alternative way, if for some reason you don't see this down here, just making sure everyone can see it. Yep. If you go to Layer and Layer Mask, this is where all the other main details can be found. So for example, if you choose Reveal All, that basically makes a mask over here that shows everything, hence shown by the white color that we have. So if for whatever reason I was to reverse to my selection and just go to town with the paint bucket tool with black, it basically gets rid of all that extra area. So that's a good thing. The reason why I know that it's working here, by the way, the mask is currently selected, so I go over here. Yeah, that's currently selected over here, and that's why it worked. Okay. Now, if I was, thank goodness for the undo button, go to Layer, Layer Mask, and choose Hide All. This basically hides everything, hence indicated by the black color that we have over here. And once again, I potentially could just go to my paint bucket tool, go to my white color, and fill that in. It comes back like that. So I'm going to undo what I just did. Get rid of the mask again. Alternatively, you can go to Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal Selection, and that basically just keeps what's selected, gets rid of everything else. Or again, if you just hit the little button that's to the right of the FX button, this will, sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. It'll add the mask like what I just did. Yeah, add layer mask. Bam. So that kind of does the same thing as what we saw before. Then finally, although I don't recommend this one so much, but it's always nice to know that it exists, going to Layer Mask, Hide Selection would be similar to if we were trying to get rid of elements that might be already selected and so on. But again, as you can see, this ended up working pretty nicely. So again, if you don't need to get complicated, then don't. Just use the Add Layer Mask area over here. Gets rid of everything else you don't need. And it does make a couple elements much easier. Remember that with layers, whatever's the highest gets seen the most. And also note about these layers, the way that they are set up over here. If I was to shrink this down using my transform, Control-T or Command-T, the mask will go with it. So that's one of those nice little safety features that you don't have to worry about as much. And thank goodness for that, because that would be a real pain in the butt to try and fix and such. So that's pretty much how masks work, and they're not too difficult if you know how to approach them. Now, the next thing and final thing that I want to show tonight, because I'm going to try and keep this relatively quick, is adjustment layers. So let's actually go into where they are. This is layer. Oop, don't forget to hit return after you're done with the transformation. There we are. Layer, new adjustment layer, and hey, take a look at that. Some of these look a little familiar. This has all the adjustments you saw previously in the image and adjustment over here. But here's the difference. All these elements that we have over here are all done destructively, which basically, once again, means once you do them and put in your settings, that's pretty much it. I mean, basically, unless you have an undo option, that's going to stay that way forever. But when it comes to layers and new adjustment layer, this is a little bit different and actually has some cool elements to this. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to do this with the brightness and contrast so you can just see this. Now, it's going to ask if you want to rename it and so on, and it's also going to be above whatever layer that you're currently on. Now check this out. If I double-click the brightness and contrast, which is what we have over here, we could turn up the brightness and contrast of not just one layer that's selected, but the entire project. And this is why this is kind of cool. Because again, if we need to make some adjustments, this would allow us to do so. Now, just a bit of a heads up on how this could also be controlled. You could also use the mask option that I have over here to basically just mask out a specific spot. Or alternatively, if I move this layer down, it only affects whatever's below it. So if there's a layer above it, as you'll see here, it no longer is affected. And I rinse and repeat. So the only area that's affected by this is now just the layer, the background layer in this case. And one thing that is very awesome about an adjustment layer, if you need to make an adjustment after the fact, you can. So I'm going to turn the adjustment for the brightness a little bit further back, turn down the contrast, and lo and behold, that looks way better. So I'm much more happy about this. And again, that's not all. Some other ones that you hopefully might remember would be layer, new adjustment layer, elements like the black and white are here if that's necessary, the hue and saturation that's up here. The inverse basically reverses whatever is bright and whatever is dark, and basically makes them vice versa. So these are some elements that we went over in class before, some very quickly and others a little bit more detail, like the hue and saturation. In fact, I'm going to add a hue and saturation right now because I want the background here to be a little bit more faded, a little bit darker, and I'm going to use the colorize yet again to add a little bit. What would be a good tint for this? Just a little bit of blue. And I think a little saturation can help make that look unique. Darken this a little bit. So if we take a look at the before and after, which we can do by going to the hue and saturation and just turn that on and off. But I'm kind of digging where this is going, so I'm going to keep this. But again, everything that's below this gets affected. So if for some reason I brought below this the brightness and contrast, the brightness and contrast would have the priority. But in this case, we're not seeing too much of a difference, so that's perfectly fine. Now, what I'd like to do second is I want to put an adjustment specifically just for the spatula here. So let's actually do that. So once again, I can use the quick selection tool. Select only what's necessary. Of course, remember to actually select the spatula when you're doing this. If the pizza's in the way, lose it. So I'm pretty satisfied with this. And let's see, what haven't we used yet? Well, we used the brightness and contrast. We used the hue and saturation. I'm not sure why I would actually want to use this, but let's say for whatever reason you want to add a little bit of black and white. Well, not really a little. It's basically one option. You can adjust and change it if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. But before I do that, I have to remember I have... Oh, actually, this is good the way that is. So the selection's all good. Layer. New adjustment layer. Once again, choosing the black and white. Now here's something that's kind of neat. If you turn on use previous layer to create clipping mask, it should actually make a mask for you immediately. Actually, since this is already selected, I shouldn't even need to hit this. I could just hit OK and bam, Insta mask ready. So I don't need to worry about making this a black and white. For everything else, it's only affecting the spatula, as you can see. So that's actually pretty nice. As you can see, no changes for the pizza. So last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do the selection. Oop, wrong one. I'm going to turn off the selection over here. Just going to give this area a quick little dab. Perfect. Nice thing about this too is if you need to make a mask or whatnot for what we have here, that's actually not that difficult, as you're going to see. So the last thing that I'm going to be doing, oops, going to turn this off, is if I'm going to, it's going to be the final new element I'm going to show. It is going to be called the the curves. Now, nice thing about the curves is anyone who wants to do any kind of color editing or color correction, this is one of the simpler methods I've found that works pretty well for color correcting. And I'll demonstrate a little bit of how that works right now. Now, just to get this started, make sure it's layer, new adjustment layer, curves, and I'm going to hit OK. Cool. Now this is the way this works. Now I'm glad I got this one instead. So you can hit the drop down, and if you need your piece to have a little bit more red, if you go to the line that's over here, yep, we can see it OK, you can click and drag this to the upper left, and it's going to have more red, or bring it down, and it gets rid of your red. So that's basically what it does for the red area. The green, again, if you bring it to the upper left, it enhances the green. You bring it down, it takes it away. Then the blue, once again, you bring it to the upper left, you start seeing a lot more blue to this. You bring it to the lower right, it starts to suck it away. So just for the sake of just experimentation, I'm going to make my pizza a flaming hot pizza, like one of those Cheetos we had. So I'm going to go to the red, bring this up a little bit. Perfect. I can turn down the green to enhance this look. Now that looks like a flaming hot pizza, and I'm pretty happy with that. And again, nice thing about this is it only affects whatever's inside the mask itself. So you're outside the mask, you're out of luck. You're above that layer, you're out of luck. But that's not necessarily a bad thing either. So that's pretty much how a majority of this stuff works. So to kind of review what we did, we went into the pen tool over here. We selected an area around the pizza. And with the path selected, we eventually used the selection to make our selection for that particular pizza to be selected by itself. So once that's done, we took the selection, used this button down here to add a regular mask. Again, usually just a hit of one button. However, if you need some more detailed elements, you can always go to Layer, Layer Mask, and again, Reveal All brings in the entire mask. Hide All hides the entire mask. Reveal Selection only reveals what you've made, or you could just, again, go down here. That does the same thing. Hide Selection basically hides whatever currently is selected at that point, although that's probably speaks for itself. But once that's done, just a little refresher, to see what a mask looked like, you could basically turn on the mask in the channels area over here, and bam, that comes up immediately. Anything that's a normal color is basically within the mask area. Anything that has a red tint to it, minus of course flaming hot Doritos, or not Doritos, pizza, that's basically what's affected by this mask. If you want to see the final version of it, you turn off the RGB, and anything that's within white is basically seen. Again, anything that's black is unseen. Anyone who wants to get into 3D eventually, this is going to be useful information for grayscale maps. But that's a conversation for another time. So I'm going to turn on the RGB, turn off the curves, mask 1. And again, the layer, new layer mask allows you to, I'm just going to use the brightness and contrast real quick, to make adjustments. But like I said before, nice thing about this is you can always visit these again and basically make adjustments afterwards. This is one of the reasons why using the adjustments that we have here, the adjustment layer specifically, is kind of nice because, again, if we need to make adjustments and changes after the fact, this allows us to do so. Once again, final review. Anything that's below said adjustment layer is affected. Anything that's above it is not. And you can even add a mask there should you need to, based on what we did previously. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show. So once again, hopefully you found this educational, and I'll see y'all next time.